From the KRWG studios at New Mexico State University, this is the second Congressional District debate with Republican Representative Steve Pearce and Democrat candidate Evelyn Madrid Erhard. Now your moderator, KRWG Director of Content, Fred Martino.
Thank you for joining us. Over the next hour, our candidates in the 2nd Congressional District will field questions on the most important issues facing our nation. Those questions presented by students in the Government Department at New Mexico State University. The rules are simple. The candidates have 1 minute to respond, and their answers should not include any mention of their opponents. Our first question is on job creation, and it's from Colin King.
The Associated Press reported last year that 53% of people under 25 with bachelor's degrees were jobless or underemployed. As the next congressional representative for this district, how do you intend to address this growing issue of unemployed or underemployed qualified and hardworking young people?
And our first response is from Evelyn Madrid Erhard.
Thank you, Colin. I will bring jobs back from overseas by changing laws that have let them go so easily overseas, but we need to bring all of those jobs back, and I think that we'll see a big difference in the United States.
Congressman Pearce.
Thanks. First of all, let me say for both of us candidates, thanks to KRWG and the students, probably this is the essential question for the entire nation. To understand what's wrong with our economy, you simply have to look at the base of it. We're 70% retail. That is, when you quit spending money, then the nation begins to sink into stagnation. So what is necessary is for us to figure out why we have lost those manufacturing jobs, and the manufacturers tell us tax policy and regulations are choking out their ability to compete worldwide. So many times they move overseas to simply be competitive. If those are the two main reasons that they move, then we should begin to address it. I never say that we don't need regulations. It has a very important part. But the regulations that choke out jobs needlessly, those are the ones that we should address. The tax code for corporations absolutely has to be addressed. Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll have many more questions dealing with the economy as we continue. Our next question, though, is on higher education, and it's from Chris Spencer.
Good morning. Student loan debt is threatening to become the next financial crisis as more students graduate with ever-increasing amounts of debt. What legislative remedies would you support in order to reduce the burden to individual students, as well as reduce the risk of widespread defaults that could destabilize our already fragile economic situation?
Congressman Pearce.
Again, great question. I think the first point is to look at the cost of education in general. It appears that it has ballooned above the economic ability to pay for it, what it justifies. Those things have self-correcting mechanisms. I think we're already seeing some of the rates come down. But then the deeper question you ask is about the debt that individuals come up with. We've had the conversion of the student loan program into a federal program. There are support payments for that. But then an even deeper question is the debt in general. We as individuals in America owe more than ever before in our history. The nation owes more debt. Both of those things destabilize our economy. They destabilize our future standards of living. So we have to address the debt nationally, and then we ought to start looking individually at the debt that we have as people.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I would support Pell Grants, and I would also support lower interest on student loans, and I will also support universities starting to look at this as a learning institution and to encourage people to come by having lower entrance rates for them to attend.
Okay. We'll continue with the topic of education, but we're going to move to K-12 education now. And our next question is from Denise Terraces.
Good morning. So, do you think it is appropriate to tie funding of schools to teacher evaluations? Yes or no, and why?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. Teacher evaluation?
Yes, is it appropriate to tie funding of schools to teacher evaluations?
No, I feel that it is not. Right now we have the No Child Left Behind, and we're still going on the standardized tests, many of them in a school year. And I don't believe that that reflects on a teacher's real ability to work with students. And until we change those exams and we start having teachers work with students individually and in smaller groups, not in 30 students per class, I believe we're going to see that teachers are doing their job, and they're doing a really great job.
Congressman Pearce.
One of the problems that we face in the country is a declining education. We're simply not competitive with other nations. If we do not address that, I think that we're going to see declining economic standards through the country. I'm not sure exactly what the standard should be, but I think teachers should live to some standard. There should be a performance measure to where parents and kids can say, if I don't learn, what good is it doing me to be in this class? So I would support some standard, whether or not it's a standardized test. I'm not sure about that. But we must be evaluating what we're doing because we're losing the competitive edge. I hear constantly in New Mexico, we lost some of our intel jobs simply because young people here in this state could not compete with people in other states. That's a scary thing for us. We must address education. The STEM subjects have got to be accelerated, and we must have outcomes, not just intended outcomes.
Healthcare is another major issue in this campaign, both at the presidential level, also at the congressional level as well. Of course, the federal healthcare reform bill was one reason for that. There are many others, including proposals on Medicare and Medicaid that have come up during the presidential race. And our next question is on healthcare. It's from Kathleen Ford.
Thank you. The GOP's premium support plan, also called a voucher plan, would change the way seniors receive health care by giving them the option to receive a limited amount of money to buy private insurance instead of utilizing Medicare. If elected, would you support such a plan in Congress, and why?
Congressman Pearce.
Thanks. The voucher plan that was put out by Mr. Ryan has got certain flaws to it, but what we've got to understand is that seniors would like to have choice. They'd like to have choice in their doctors, choice in their programs. Maybe his voucher plan is not the best one, but we must be giving seniors the choice. If they want to stay on Medicare, that's fine. They should have that choice. But others who would opt out also ought to have that choice. We did something similar in the prescription drug plan that we put forward. Seniors had like an 84% approval of the choices after. They could stay in the old plan or they can go out and seek their own. My mom is somebody who would have stayed in the old plan. She's 86. Doesn't really want to have to fiddle with it. She would stay in the Medicare plan. But there are other seniors who would absolutely go out, do the research online, and find a better option. I just think if we open it up to those competitive forces, then the government plan gets better.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I would never have voted for Paul Ryan's plan, and I would never support a voucher plan. Right now, when you ask most people who are on Medicare, they love the program. And if they do love the program and it's working, I think that we need to continue to use that plan.
We continue with the issue of health care now, and our next question is from Mihan Hung.
Thank you. The past and current administrations had to make significant investments with taxpayers' money to bail out banking and auto industries. Can the American people trust the non-government sector to provide a fairly priced health coverage? Yes, no, and why?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
On health coverage from the private sector, I believe I would support some time for us to start working from the Affordable Care Act and start moving that to a single payer system. Once we're on a single payer system, we're going to end up saving an awful lot of money when the veterans are under the single payer system and the Medicare system. We're all together, and I believe that people will have a really good chance of good health care.
Congressman Pearce.
Thanks. The idea of health care, whether it comes from private sources, if it's dependable, or the government sources, I always start with the idea that if government can run business, let it cure the post office first. I don't think it's doing too great a job on that. One of the problems in healthcare is that government puts mandates on the companies. And so I think if those mandates were opened up, for instance, shopping across state lines, that would give better products inside certain states if we could do that. I think that our healthcare plans should be portable. We should carry those with us. A lot of changes that we could make in our insurance coverage, but I think the private market is always going to provide better options and better products than the government by itself.
New Mexico is, of course, one of the poorest states in the nation. has one of the highest rates of people who are not insured. It also has one of the highest rates of hunger. And our next question is on hunger. It's from Lydia Hammond.
Hello, good morning. According to the USDA, 16 million American children live in food insecure households, and 1 in 6 Americans face hunger daily. What can you, and by proxy Congress, do to help fix Americans who are living in food insecure households?
Congressman Pearce.
Sure. If we take a look at the agriculture bill that just passed or went through the House, about, I think, 60% of that are the food programs, the nutrition programs. We address childhood nutrition. The government is doing a lot to ensure that children that live with parents who have inadequate incomes are actually supported. The last thing we want is bad nutrition in the country. We're doing a lot right now as a nation.
I would never have let the Farm Bill lapse right now, and especially because we live in one of the biggest agricultural areas, Congressional District 2, and our university is a top leader in education in agriculture. But the main thing is that because we are the poorest state right now, we need to make sure that children who often only have one good hot meal a day, that those children are getting those in the schools. So letting the Farm Bill lapse was a big mistake right now.
And we do have another question on that bill. It comes from Emma Hamilton.
Thank you. My question is also about the Farm Bill, but as our representative in Congress, what specific programs, if you could elaborate a little bit, do you feel are most important to either cut or protect in order to best serve New Mexicans?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I don't feel that when it comes to food right now and overpopulation, that food is one of the things that we would cut, and we're already having difficulty with water, and farmers are having a great deal of difficulty in the Southwest with water. So we need to help farmers as much as we can to keep food production going. But I do like the idea that we would have in preschool that children have good hot meals, and also in K through 12, that is really important, and I wouldn't think of cutting that. But also because real fruits and vegetables are so important to people growing and getting all of the nutritions from it, I think that we need to be able to continue providing people with some kind of a way so that they can buy those from our local farmers.
Congressman Pearce.
One of the things that's causing the greatest pressure on New Mexico agriculture is the policy of using grain for ethanol. And it's a bad policy, and that's one that I would absolutely think that we should rescind. Another problem that we deal with are fraud and corruption in the food programs. People are misusing the system, misusing those programs. Absolutely should think that we should reform the programs to keep those who are just abusing the process from taking money from the people who deserve it.
We thank you so much for joining us for the second congressional debate. All of our questions tonight are being presented by students from New Mexico State University's Government Department. As you can tell, many of the questions are on issues that affect our entire country, but we also will cover some questions that are specific to this district. And that's where we move right now. And a question from Riley Stenper.
In regards to the creation of a national monument in Otero, Mesa, do you support this? Yes or no, and why?
Congressman Pearce.
Yes, I support it. I have actually introduced a bill that would create the monument around the organs. If you take a look at, there are 3 different suggestions, 2 bills, one mine, and then another Senator Bingham's. That bill, my bill, is about 58,000 acre, a smaller footprint. Senator Bingham's bill is about 200,000 acres and creates entire wilderness. Wilderness is a very restrictive definition that limits access, limits ability to have economic activity. Also limits the access of Border Patrol to the border, and his bill includes areas right at the border. So we submitted our alternative bill. Then there's a suggestion from another group that the president should create 600,000 acres into the monument area. again, spots along the border that would not allow access to our border enforcement authorities, areas where flood control could not be applied. So my bill is the least restrictive, and that's the reason I submitted it.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I support it, and I support Senator Bingaman's plan, and it is the plan that most of the population in Congressional District 2 supports. And I feel that our borders, that there is enough land already in between the border to keep us safe and protected.
Okay. Of course, related to the border, drug policy is a major issue, and that's where we move now. Our next question is from Arcadio Quintana.
Thank you. Most of the violence at the border is drug-related, with cartels looking to move illegal drugs like marijuana up north from Mexico into the United States. Last week, we had a Border Patrol agent gunned down in Arizona, and although the details show a case of friendly fire, the event is still rooted in the anxiety that the area is considered to be heavily used by drug smugglers. If legislation was brought to the floor looking to legalize marijuana, would you support that legislation? Why or why not?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I will support the use of marijuana for medical purposes. I will support it because there are drugs that we already use as painkillers and tranquilizers that are much more dangerous than those. But I also would like to point out that our border, especially with El Paso, it is one of the safest cities, and then our closest town in District 2 is Sunland Park, and we're not having any problems there. It's happening on the other side, and the Mexican side of the border, and so we are finding that we are safe here, but I would support marijuana for medical use.
Congressman Pearce.
I would not vote to legalize marijuana. When I look at the destructiveness of drugs throughout our society, it worries me for the coming generations. We did probably, I would guess, 50 town hall meetings, open meetings, many in schools talking about methamphetamines. Just the idea of legalization of drugs is not going to deal with the problem. If you want to deal with the problem, you should ask what's wrong with the heart of America. The reports I've seen say we consume up to 75% of the world's illegal drugs. There has to be something, emptiness in us that is looking for that. So rather than trying to legalize a substance that is questionable at best, I think we should deal with the heart of America.
Of course, another major issue in our region and all across the country involves immigration policy. And our next question deals with that topic. It's from Kelby Labs.
Hi. Do you agree with Governor Romney's statement that Arizona's immigration law, SB 1070, should be a model for the nation? Yes or no, and why?
Congressman Pearce.
Well, the Supreme Court declared part of it to be constitutional, that is the ability to check people when they are at police stops. I would agree with our Supreme Court. I think that they're the ones who evaluate the long-term view. They found part of that law to be unconstitutional. What Governor Romney, I think, is dealing with is that sometimes our border agencies are very ineffective at stopping the movement of cartels, the movement of drugs across the border. I think people are really becoming insistent that someone do something. And so I don't know exactly what he was referring to, but I would say that that Arizona is simply trying to say, "Ooh, this is getting scary." I had the opportunity as a congressman to tour the Oregon Pipes National Monument. It's there that the signs are up saying this area inside the U.S. is off limits to American tourists because it's too dangerous. That's, I think, what we're trying to address and needs to be addressed.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I would never support a law like SB 1070 in New Mexico, never. It is restrictive and it is unfair, and I just couldn't do it. And I don't feel that Arizona is having any problems on their border, so I don't see that as something that would benefit us. Furthermore, the people that are coming or have been coming for many years from Mexico, they're helping our farms, they're helping our ranches, and I feel that they're here and they have been a real big beneficial part of our country.
We have another question on immigration now, and it comes from Martin Camacho.
Thank you. The 14th Amendment says that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. Because of this, children of undocumented immigrants born in the U.S. are legal citizens of the U.S. What should happen to the parents of these children when they are caught by Immigration and Customs Enforcement? And if your answer is to deport them, what should be done with their children?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I would never deport these people. First of all, their children should never be separated from their parents. And some of these people have been here for many decades already. And because they've helped build our country. You could see it all across the United States. Any of the cities starting in about 1982, we had so much growth in buildings and hotels and restaurants. And all of these folks have been helping to build our country, and I would never separate a family. Thank you.
Congressman Pearce.
Again, the question for me is not so much who we should allow in. Every one of us really respects and appreciates the fact that people would come here and make a better life. The question of birthright citizenship is one where we're one of the last nations in the world to allow this, and we have to ask the long-term policy if it's sustainable. What I would probably favor is something where you go ahead and give the birthright to the child, but they can't exercise that right until they're of majority status, until they're on their own. That way, if the child would have to move with the parents. I don't think that we can allow the newborns in this country to be a way that others access. And that's, there's a wrestling that goes back and forth that question. It's an adequate discussion. I think we should be having it. But I tend to say, what can we sustain long term?
We want to give special thanks to Dr. Neil Harvey, the director of the Government Department at New Mexico State University, for working with the students who are asking these outstanding questions during our debate. Most of the questions deal with domestic issues, but we will have a few on foreign policy. We move to that now. And Haley Grant.
The U.S. responses to political turmoil in Libya and Syria have been very different. What criteria justify U.S. intervention in crisis states?
Congressman Pearce.
I came out deeply opposed to the initial intervention of the U.S. in Libya for about the same reasons I think you're asking. Now we're showing that we're unwilling to go in, the president's unwilling to go into Syria, where far more violence is occurring to the citizens than occurred in Libya. Secondly, I felt like the American taxpayer and the American soldiers have done enough for liberty around the world, and so I really deeply disagreed with what the president did, and we did it vocally and openly. Now then, I think we're seeing the fruits of that. I was not a Gaddafi fan, was not a Mubarak fan, but now we're seeing instability that I think comes from changing the governments without any clear power base to replace them, and so you're finding the chaos, you're finding the Muslim Brotherhood, who had been outlawed in all the Arab countries, coming to strength. So I've opposed our position up till now. We should have responded more strongly when our embassy and our embassy personnel were killed and attacked.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
Recently, 100 leaders from around the world at the United Nations meeting in New York said that the onus is on each country to follow the laws set forth in the world, and then that they must also work towards peace. But when that cannot be done, I believe that if the United States were to get involved in helping any of these countries, I do like the way that President Obama handled it when the people in Libya wanted to have Gaddafi taken out. He asked other Arabic countries to get involved with that. And when you get other countries involved and are helping, it's much better to do that.
Haley Grant has another question now on foreign policy.
A number of military aircraft have been deployed to a U.S. base in Okinawa, Japan, as part of President Obama's campaign for a stronger military presence in the Far East. Should the U.S. be building up a preventative military presence abroad? Yes or no, and why?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I believe because the world is so much closer now because of overpopulation, the United States is always going to have to be looking at our protection. And by having bases, it's going to help us. We're going to be able to track what's going on in other parts of the world, and I would support our protection.
Congressman Pearce.
The peace and stability of the world really demand a strong presence by some nation, and right now the only nation that has the capability is the United States. I believe in American exceptionalism. I believe in American power. I think we should defend our borders. I think we should have a strong national defense. Whatever we can do to ensure our friends, whether it be Japan, South Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan, or whoever, whatever we can do to reassure them that we're there beside them when outside threats come toward them, I think we should be doing it. When we will act with affirmativeness, then I think that we'll see that a more stable world exists. As we dissipate our power, as we dissipate our ability to respond, I think you're seeing a more fragmented world. I think you're seeing a more dangerous world, one with more chaos, and so those tend to alarm me. Strong military presence, always support.
You're watching the 2nd Congressional District debate, and we are so pleased to have you with us. In-depth news and public affairs across the state of New Mexico is only possible with your donation to your public television station. Thank you to our members, and thank you to the government department at New Mexico State University for working with us on this project. We move back to domestic policy now, and Chris Spencer.
Thank you. Recently, Mitt Romney made some comments regarding the number of Americans who pay no income taxes yet still receive some form of government benefits. Do you believe that an entitlement mindset exists within the United States today? And what do you believe is the responsibility of both individual citizens and the government to assist those that are truly in need?
Congressman Pearce.
To lump all the 47% into one group, I think, was a mistake on the part of Governor Romney. You have people on Social Security, Medicare. They have paid their way. They have paid the taxes. They've earned these benefits. I don't consider those entitlements, frankly, Social Security and Medicare. I think those are benefits that they paid for. What I am alarmed about, though, and I can't tell how big and pervasive it is, every day I hear people say they can't get work, but every day I hear employers say we can't find employees. So we've had 7 or 8 8th job fair coming up this week. And each one of those, we've had up to 3,000 jobs available in one day. The employers tell me they're just looking for 2 things in employees. Number 1, show up for work after you get hired. Number 2, pass the drug screen. And they can't find employees. 3,000 jobs in one job fair. I bet we didn't fill 10 of those jobs. And so we have something going on, and I think the government should be assessing that.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I never would have voted for Paul Ryan's plan to end Social Security, Medicare, the way that we know them, or defund Medicaid. And I would never, ever do away with the laws of the Affordable Care Act that have helped us to get the insurance that we need to have, that used to keep people with pre-existing conditions away from having that fairness. So my feeling about entitlements, whether you want to call them entitlements, I don't think people are entitled. I think they work very hard for them. And people who are in poverty count on some kind of assistance because they work also.
We have another question now on immigration, and it comes from Kelby Labs.
Do you support the federal DREAM Act legislation, yes or no, and why?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
Yes, I support it, and I am so happy I got Congressman Raul Grijalva's endorsement because he knows that I support the DREAM Act. I made phone calls about the DREAM Act in 2010, and I will continue to do that. And I am so glad that President Obama has started the process for it, and yes.
Congressman Pearce.
The DREAM Act appeals to the deepest compassion in every single one of us. But when you look at the application, the way that the bill was written, it's full of unfairness. In other words, if you come here illegally, you get in-state tuition no matter where you go. What about you all sitting in the audience? You don't get in-state tuition if you choose to go to Texas or if you choose to go to North Carolina. You have to pay out-of-state tuition, and so where's the fairness? Well, the next level of unfairness are the people who follow the law to come here. If you come here as a foreign exchange student, you'll pay out-of-state tuition. And so I never understood the fairness of the DREAM Act and how it applied. But then the application that is disconcerting is that once you apply, even if you're rejected, you can never be sent out of the country. Those things are deep flaws in the legislation. President Obama actually said he didn't have the power to implement it last year, and then he did. I wonder where he got the power between last year and this year.
And we have another question on border security now. It comes from Arcadio Quintana.
Thank you. At the U.S.-Mexico high-level group meeting in September, Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano stated, and I quote, "We are committed to working with our partners in Mexico to build a 21st century border that will meet the security and economic needs of our countries, today and well into the future. Do you believe that this 21st century security effort should include building a fence along the border? Why or why not?"
Congressman Pearce.
There were several opportunities to vote for the fence. I've always voted against. I think it may have been included in one bill. I've always thought the fence was expensive and also ineffective. I have a section of the fence actually in my office. The guy cut it down, brought it in, it's big square tubing. He said that there was a guy sitting on the other side cutting the fence down. As soon as he rolled up his cutting torches and he left, the other guy was cutting it down. I think that we can have good border security through modern technology and the presence of people. I do believe we should have a secure border, absolutely. Some of the drug smuggling, the human smuggling that comes across the border are threatening our way of life. I think we absolutely should secure it. I do believe that we should make it easier for people who just come here to work, separate them out from the border problem, get them biometric identifiers, let them come through the border like that. I think they would come and go. But separate the two streams of traffic, I think we can absolutely have a more secure border.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I would never have voted for a fence, never. And again, I think it's ineffective, but I also would like to say that the borders have been very safe. And so thanks to Janet I can't say it. Napolitano is going to come out of me. And I'm very grateful that we have safe borders right now.
Okay. Well, we are running a little ahead of schedule in our debate. The time that we have, additional time, will be very valuable because in addition to the pre-prepared questions from our students at New Mexico State University, right now our students are working on follow-up questions in the event that we have a little bit of extra time. So we're excited that this is a learning process, this debate, for the students that are asking the questions, not only before the debate, but actually during the debate, allowing them to formulate follow-up questions and additional questions for our candidates. Tax policy, of course, has been a major issue in this campaign at the presidential level, at the congressional level, and our next question is on tax policy. It comes from Lydia Hammond.
Hello again. A recent study conducted by the Congressional Research Services looked at the past 60 years and has found that there is little to no evidence that tax cuts for the highest earners are associated with investment or growth in the economy. Based on this, do you support large tax cuts for the highest earners? Why or why not?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I will not support tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the United States. They've had 12 years now to have those cuts, and I think that they should be grateful that they've had them and say, we've got our money put away, and now it's time for us to help build our roads, help build our bridges and our public schools, and those would be very good things that will happen.
Congressman Pearce.
Yes, I don't see any effort in Congress to do wholesale lowering of rates for the wealthy. I think that everyone should pay their fair share. The question comes up, what's their fair share? Anytime you get more than about 25% of the nation's revenue coming to the government and from the government, what you have is stagnation that tends to fight back against job creation. So tax policy, jobs, they're hand in hand, and we need to take a look at how Washington is spending the money, because I believe that we don't have a tax problem in America. I think we have a spending problem in America. And so rather than cutting taxes for the wealthy, I think we should be looking at how we're spending the money that we do bring in.
And we have another question now on health care. It comes from Mihan Hong.
The Congressional Budget Office reported that there are budget consequences on both sides if you repeal or enact affordable health care. What would you do to prevent further increase in deficit, and how would you do things differently?
Congressman Pearce.
I think that the Obamacare legislation is going to create tremendous deficits on top of what we already have, about $1.3 trillion right now deficit. It could double that. It's what threatens our entire economic future. So I would repeal the bill, and then we would bring back in pieces of bills I think that would be effective. I would not mind reusing the 26. You could stay with your parents' insurance till you're 26. Would not mind incorporating health savings accounts. That's where young people could keep up to 70% of their insurance premium in a savings account that builds and allows you to lower your deductible. I wouldn't mind shopping across state lines, portability. Probably the biggest thing to do to affect the cost of health care is tort reform. We should do that. So I would put together a completely different plan for how to address the rising costs in health care in the country.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I would do away with as much waste and fraud as we can, and then I would like to see people, when they go to their doctors, have a wellness plan with those doctors, and then that way people aren't waiting until they have cancer or they're in their second stages of cancer, but we've already reached those. And I think that working towards a single payer system like Medicare would take the middleman out, and that will save a lot of money.
Another question on health care now. It comes from Kathleen Ford.
Thank you. If the Affordable Care Act were to be repealed, what action would you take in Congress to ensure that even low-income New Mexicans would still be able to afford health care?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I believe that low-income people will be taken care of. We need to have those programs that do, and I know that Medicaid, will take care of children and elderly people, but we need to make sure that the rest of the low-income people aren't having to go to the hospitals, because that is a real expense, but we need to make sure that those folks are covered.
Congressman Pearce.
As Evelyn said, the Medicaid really addresses the poor in our society. But not only that, every county has indigent funds where people with lower incomes or the inability to pay actually have their bills paid by the county, and those are state programs. I think that we should make sure the safety net is there. We should make sure that no one gives up their entire wealth, their entire asset base in order to chase health problems. But I think that's easily doable without the government taking over the entire health care and the health care insurance field as it did in the Affordable Care Act.
And we have about 20 minutes left in our debate, so our students will have a chance to ask some follow-up questions in addition to their prepared questions. And we move now to income inequality and Colin King.
According to Jordan Wiseman of The Atlantic magazine, the income inequality in the United States is higher in 2012 than it was in 1774. How would you address this increasing gap between the richest and poorest Americans?
Congressman Pearce.
Sure. We see that gap being addressed right now in eastern New Mexico. If you go over into Lee, Eddy, and Chavez counties, you'll find that truck drivers are making $80,000 a year. That's working 40 hours a week. They go to overtime, they make $120,000 a year. And I think that the market actually, when we let it work freely, that it can correct itself. Many of the times you just have outside pressures, though, that are helping keep our rates down, our labor rates down in the country. If we will get enough competition, if we will rebuild our economy, rebuild those job opportunities, then simply the shortage of labor, the supply of labor would demand the higher rates. That's what's going on in the oil field. It's a natural occurrence, and I think that we should realize that it works that way.
When I came out of my master's degree program at NMSU, it was the first time in 1982 that I had seen people go to part-time work. That was the trend at the time, and that was because corporations didn't have to pay health insurance, and they didn't have to pay into a pension plan. And so now today we are finding that more and more people are working 2 and 3 part-time jobs, and there are very few jobs to begin with. But as soon as we get laws that will protect us and those jobs come from overseas, I think that we're going to see a lesser gap in income. And also when the very wealthiest, top 1% and 2% start paying their share of taxes, that will help also.
Okay, we have another question now on hunger from Emma Hamilton.
Following my earlier Farm Bill question, would you support the deeper cuts to SNAP or food stamp programs in the House Farm Bill? Why or why not?
Okay, Ms. Madrid Erhard.
No, I would not support it. The people who are needing those the most, that's what they have to have, and I would never support cutting those.
Congressman Pearce.
I think the question that we have to analyze is the people who are receiving them. If people are receiving food stamps that need them, I don't think anybody in the country would take it away. But those areas where the food stamp programs are filled with graft, corruption, and waste, I absolutely think that we should have an investigative review of how the programs are working, and we should have then responses. If the bureaucracies are not taking care of the waste, the fraud, and the abuse, then we should do something to change the bureaucracies. We should change the agency itself. We should change the people in the agency. Also, duplications in food programs. I think there's something like 123 childhood nutrition programs. I think maybe we could pay half the number of bureaucrats and maybe get by on 60-something programs. We allow duplications in order to just create more bureaucracy. It's a process that's failing.
We have another question now on education, and it comes from Denise Terrazas.
Thank you. Do you think that education should be a responsibility of the state or of the federal government? Yes or no, and why?
Congressman Pearce.
Well, I'm a strong constitutional advocate, and if you read Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, it doesn't mention education as a federal agency problem. Therefore, I would keep it in the states, because our Constitution is also very clear that those actions that are not given directly to the federal government are reserved for the states. That's Amendment number 10. So when I look at the Founding Fathers, I think they had it right. We should keep the main programs closer to the people. To affect programs in Washington, anybody from New Mexico, takes you $1,000 to get to Washington. You take 3 days of your life. You have your hotel rooms there. It's very expensive for you to have any voice at all, and then you feel powerless. The closer you are to government, the better off we are, and I think that was the vision of our Founding Fathers, and the reason the Constitution is so critical. Keep the things local that we can keep local.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I support the federal government being in charge of our public schools, and the reason that I do is that each state could then decide to bring religion into the public schools, and I believe that that would not be beneficial to students because there are so many different religions, and I feel that if we have a uniform group of folks that are looking at what goes in history books, I think that that would be much better than having each state decide that they may omit something from history or decide that science is not important or that climate change is not important. And we hear this a lot from different states who are saying that they would never allow climate change study in public schools. So I think that having the federal government be in charge is important.
Okay. Well, we do have a little time remaining in our debate, and that gives our students an opportunity to ask follow-up questions, maybe questions that they developed during this presentation. And I'm going to ask the students to state their name before they ask their question.
Good morning. My name is Haley Grant, and this is to do with foreign policy. Recognizing the dire status of the federal deficit.
Yeah, speak up.
Oh,
you can speak up. Thank you.
Recognizing the dire status of the federal deficit and over expenditures, how can we afford to continue such a strong military presence abroad?
Okay, Ms. Madrid Erhard.
Looking at the military proposals right now, we're at $500 billion, and candidate Romney would like to bring that up to $900 billion, and I would never support that. I believe that we need to protect our country, but we can use technology, a lot of technology, tracking equipment. There are many different ways and intelligence that will help us to protect without having to spend as much as we have in the past.
Congressman Pearce.
A great question. This is a sort of tension that we should be finding in the issues that face us as a nation. How can we, with deficits, justify a strong military and acting overseas? 9/11 was extraordinarily expensive, almost 3,000 lives, but it cost a couple of $2 billion. It came just within a fraction of sinking our entire economy. If we think that we can simply ignore the threats to the United States and fight the battles here, then I think we as a nation are making mistakes. Can we operate more effectively in the DoD? Absolutely. But I do believe a strong military presence stabilizes the world, and support that. We should just find out how to pay for it, and I think that was the key to the question.
Colin King. I had a follow-up on the income inequality question. It's grown since Reagan began a long-term trend of deregulating Wall Street and was compounded by the Bush-era tax cuts, especially for the wealthiest Americans. I was wondering how you would restore the balance both between Wall Street and Main Street, and how you would address the growing gap between the CEO salary of a company and the regular employee salary in the same company.
Congressman Pearce.
That's a lot to address in 60 seconds. The first thing is that I was opposed every single bailout. I do not think taxpayers should bail out Wall Street. Wall Street made a lot of mistakes, and the marketplace only works when you let it work. Those companies were about to find the risks that they incurred were going to sink their companies, and so we established a policy of too big to fail. I think that the market should determine what corporate salaries are, what corporation executives are. If the government can tell corporation owners and executives what to make, they can tell you what to make. I think every one of us should be able to use our skills and our intuitiveness. We should be able to use our ingenuity to make whatever we can. How we use that funds, that's how we determine us as characters. Don't limit what we make. Let us express ourselves in our giving.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I'd like to address that. I think that we're finding that CEOs in the last few decades have been making astronomical amounts of money, sometimes a bonus, a single bonus. In fact, for my insurance company a few years ago, the CEO got I think it was $34 million just as a bonus, not as his regular pay. And that's taking money out of services to people, but it also doesn't allow the people at the bottom of a company to make enough to have a dream for a home someday. But I also think that banks need to be smaller. We need to break up banks even more, and banks, for example, in Congressional District 2, are going to be able to give farmers a loan when they need them, or ranchers when times are bad. And so when we have small local banks, that's going to be the best thing for us.
Can we afford a 20% tax cut on top of the Bush-era tax cuts?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
We cannot afford tax cuts for the wealthiest people. No, that time is over with. We have seen what it has done to the country, and I believe that tax cuts for the wealthiest people would be a really big mistake. We cannot afford them.
Congressman Pearce.
I don't know of a plan to give a 20% tax cut to anyone, frankly. I do know that on January the 1st, the nation is going to see a dramatic tax increase as the Bush-era tax cuts are phased out. There's a trigger mechanism that says that they will lapse unless we in Congress take action. So if we allow that tax cut to lapse and we see tax increases across the nation, what you're going to see is our economy jolting down. Again, there'll be fewer jobs, less prosperity. The CBO has said that the estimate about 3% starting January the 1st if we allow those. Keep in mind we're a retail economy. If we take money away from the consumers, they have less money to spend. Also, if we tax the capital gains, we'll stop the trading of stocks, we'll stop the sale of houses, things where people make capital gains. All of those will depress the economy.
Thank you. My name is Emma Hamilton, and my question is, many Americans we've seen in public opinion polls are frustrated by the lack of bipartisan cooperation in Congress. So what would you do as our congressional representative to address this issue?
Congressman Pearce.
Thanks. The first thing that we did is about two and a half years ago began discussions with people who are radically different from us, from my viewpoints. I think that's what we should do. That group was LULAC. We're also, sometime later this week, we're going to have a statewide virtual conference with women. I believe that women make 85% of the decisions in health care. They make about 85% of the decisions in education and the investments for the home. And so we've started these discussions on local levels, and it's been so well received. We're bringing Democrats, Republicans, and independent women together and saying, you're the ones who nurture families. The guys are perhaps more competitive. They don't get in and work to a solution. But I believe that when women start working toward the solutions for the nation, then we will find the answers that we look for. And finally, I'm working with one of the most liberal Democrats in Congress, the two of us. We've been stirring it up in committee. We went to dinner and said, hey, let's quit this and why don't we work together? So we're going to continue those tax discussions because I think that's the way forward.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
In the 2010 election, we had the Tea Party coalition take over Washington, and they are not there to negotiate with other people. They are there because the Koch brothers have invented them and put all their money into paying for all of the different elections across the country. So until the voters decide to vote the Tea Party caucus out, we're not going to have them cooperating and wanting to help on the issues that matter most to people, like Social Security, Medicare, and all of those programs. There are Republicans, there are decent Republicans. We saw two that are leaving, Senators Lugar and Snow, and we know that there are really decent Republicans, but the Tea Party coalition is there for another reason.
Hi, my name is Riley Stenberg, and my question is, do you support drug testing for welfare in New Mexico? Yes or no, and why?
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
No, I would not support drug testing. Why that program? Why not more programs? It doesn't make any sense. It's almost an intimidation. People are already embarrassed that they are struggling, and then to have somebody do that, it's not a good idea.
Congressman Pearce.
I actually have a bill in Congress that would drug test for both unemployment and welfare. I think it's a moral question. What nation would sit and watch while families destroy themselves, destroy the future of their kids? Which drug addicts are the family models for the kids moving forward and getting out of the circumstances? So what we would do is simply say that let's help. Let's figure out what the problem is, and let's help you move and improve your life. If we did that, a lot of the cost to government would go down, unemployment would decrease, so the deficit would decrease. Also, as you put these people back to work, they'd start paying taxes. So as more people work and as fewer programs are needed to support those who are having trouble, then you find the deficit beginning to collapse from the cost side and the revenue side. As a business owner, that's something that's extremely necessary for us.
Hello, my name is Arcadio Quintana. And my question is on women's rights. There's a comment made earlier that the wisdom of the Supreme Court should be considered. And lately there's been a trend in legislation, both at the state and federal level, that complicates women's access to abortion services. Since Roe v. Wade and Casey settled that conversation, do you think it's worth Congress's attention and time to revisit women's rights, a woman's right to access abortion services?
Congressman Pearce.
A strong pro-life advocate, also feel like that tax dollars should never be used to fund abortions. That crosses a line that causes people to compromise their own internal principles. We took a very strong stance when Health and Human Services put out the notification that the Catholics would have to start buying products that were in conflict with their conscience. I do not believe the government has the right to step in and assess these sorts of mandates to the buying public. But again, a strong pro-life supporter.
Ms. Madrid Erhard.
I stand for a woman's right to choose what is best for her health and her welfare. Only she knows what is best for her. And I am so happy that in 1973 we got Roe v. Wade passed. And we need to, it's a shame that now, after all these years from 1973 to now, that we're having this discussion right now. People are not in favor of going out and having abortions. I've never heard anybody say anything about it in any of my circles of friends. People only would have to do that if their health wasn't good. They would have to make those decisions. But people know because we've got birth control pills and we have other methods for birth control. So we don't have to punish women.
Okay. What an outstanding debate that this has been. I want to thank both of you for participating in this. It has been incredibly informative.
Thank you for your service. Okay.
We've been able to cover so many different issues. And I want to take the time to give a round of applause to our students from New Mexico State University. They did an outstanding job coming up with lots of wonderful questions. Thank you so much for joining us for New Mexico's 2nd Congressional District debates. The candidates, our students, everyone involved, and you, our members, who make in-depth news and public affairs possible with your donations. My special thanks to Dr. Neil Harvey, Director of New Mexico State's Government Department, for helping to organize our debate. For all of New Mexico's public television stations, I'm Fred Martino. Good night.